echo in your head. There's a strange vibration rising out from the heart of America, America. Listen to the sound of the drum calling players to the game of the new world order. Don't be caught unaware when the heads start rolling. No, it couldn't happen here. I know it wouldn't happen here. But I will not submit to authority of man. I'm alive, I'm awake. This is more than I can take. If you had an open door, would you kill a little more? Listen to the cries of the dead in the wake of the Sudan. Is there no one out there? I see blood in the sands of despair in Africa. Listen to the sound of applause in a chamber full of men selling out their people as they plan their assault on the heart of America. No, it couldn't happen here. I know it never happened here. I will not submit to authority of man. I'm alive, I'm awake. This is more than I can take.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Double Cross Radio, coming to you live from the state of Jefferson, or the Republic of Jefferson, or the Jefferson Republic, or just plain old Jefferson. And tonight we are once again without my co-host Drew Lamb. He had his grandfather passed away last week, just a few hours after our last show. And they had the funeral today, and Drew is with family, and we wish them all happy remembrances of his grandfather Douglas's life. And he's quite a man, and he had a big impact on Drew's life, and a lot of what we enjoy today as the person that Drew Lamb has been or become. A lot of that was fashioned and formed with his relationship with his grandfather. And so we're all saddened with that loss, at least the ones that know Drew are, and we wish him well. I also am joined tonight with a frequent guest and a good friend of the show, Miner Dave Everest. Dave, how are you doing tonight? I think he may have forgot to unmute his microphone. Are you there, Dave?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I was interrupted by somebody knocking on my door.
Okay. And anyway, Dave is going to join us in a little bit. I wanted to start off by reading something that Drew had posted on his Facebook page about his grandfather. And this, to me, it was really moving, and it really, it made me stop and think a lot about different things in life. And I'll talk about that a little bit, but I think that you should all hear this, and hopefully I do it justice in reading it. I'm not the I tend to, my eyes scan faster than I read, so I tend to have to pause every once in a while. So I'll have to practice on this. Will make it better. Now, this is Drew talking about his grandfather. He says, "My paternal grandfather, Douglas S. Lamb, passed away at 10 a.m. this morning." That was Friday morning. He was 94 years old. He enlisted in the Army Air Force during World War II, and he was qualified to be a pilot. However, an inner ear issue caused him to change his plans, so he became an electrician and then worked for Ma Bell after the war. As a child, he would tell me about his experiences during the war, including highly technical descriptions of how some of the radio equipment and other systems worked. For the most part, he was stationed on Canton Island. And when I was about 30 years old, he started telling me more stories about the war. He was on a plane that was flying between islands when an engine failed. They were given orders to ditch it, but chose not to because they feared being eaten by sharks. Instead, they threw as much as they could off the plane to lighten it, and they made it to an island where they landed safely. He said to me, "If we had jumped off that plane, you wouldn't be here today." That's probably right. He was also on a ship at Iwo Jima. When they arrived, many of the pilots and other men wanted to camp out on the beach. He thought it would be best to stay on board the ship. That night, kamikazes who were hiding in the caves of Mount Suribachi came down to the beach and cut the throats of the men. Again, he said to me, if I had camped on the beach with the pilots, I wouldn't be here today. I often wondered what kept him going during those times. It must have been scary. One day I had an opportunity to look through his journal that he'd kept during the war, and I realized that it was his faith in God that carried him through it all. When I was little, he would occasionally take me to work with him. This usually would happen on a Saturday when he'd be watching Wild World of Sports or a game, and he would get called in to fix something. He would bring me into the building downtown Medford and sit me down on a stool in front of a huge bank of consoles and monitors. Then he would tune the satellite feed to a channel with cartoons, and I would get to watch Speed Buggy and Scooby-Doo long after the Sunday morning cartoons were over. He retired from the phone company in the 1980s. This was a great time for both of us. We would work on airplane models and got into computer programming. We both had Texas Instruments 99/4A computers. We shared programs, games, and tips. And at the time, my Uncle Steve had a chain of kite shops up and down the Oregon coast. My grandpa moved to Florence and then to Newport so my grandmother could run the stores. And I spent most of my spring and summer vacations working in the stores and flying kites with Grandpa at Agate Beach. I learned a lot from him, including how to tie various knots like a bowline. He cultivated the nerdy technical side of my personality. And when I took ASVAB tests during my senior year in high school, I surprisingly showed a high aptitude for electronics. Given that he had diabetes and lupus, it's amazing that he lived such a long life. He watched his diet, didn't drink alcohol, didn't smoke, and he went for a walk from his house to the end of Madrona Lane and back almost every day. A few years ago when we were out to dinner to celebrate his birthday, and I embarrassed him when I asked him to share with us what he found to be the most important element to have a good life, he said that for him, it was to work at a job that suited him and to have a family. In both of these endeavors, he was successful. And as I read this, I couldn't help but thinking, selfishly, that's the first thing that popped in my mind. I'm going to be honest. The first thing that popped into my mind was, man, I'm so glad that he hadn't met his makers on that plane ride or at the beach at Iwo Jima, that he was able to make it through the war unscathed and was able to have children who eventually had grandchildren, and one of them became my broadcast partner and very close friend, Drew Lamb. And I think how much that has enhanced my life and made my life better. And I'm somebody that never met Doug Lamb, ever, but I feel a great loss at his passing just because of my association with Drew. And I thought I would share this with you because those of you who listen to this show on a regular basis, I'm sure that you also feel that, well, actually, without Drew, there wouldn't have been a double-crossed radio show. He's the one that put it all together. He's the one that had the connections, and he's the one that suffered through, months of painful learning on my part, trying to get better at talking in front of a microphone, and it was I'm still not great, but those first few shows were kind of unlistenable. I tried not to talk too much. So anyway, I wanted to share that with all of you. And then I also had another story that I'm kind of taking from somebody that I know here in town. A couple of weeks ago, he shared with me a story of his time in the service, military service, and he was a paratrooper in the U.S. Army. And I'm not going to give his name and all that information out because I think this would just generate a lot of unwanted attention at this point in time. Although I don't think it's anything about him that he's embarrassed about or anything like that. It's just part of his life. It's over. He wants to go on. But anyway, in signing up to become a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne, he was given a contract, or he signed a contract with the U.S. government to perform the services that they required. And it's kind of like indentured servitude. And upon the completion of 20 years of service, he'd be given a military pension, which And today's dollars would be, today would be worth about somewhere around $2,000 to $2,500 a month. So that would be roughly about $25,000 a year in income. During the term of his service, he was involved in action in the First Gulf War. He was a platoon sergeant, and his platoon was sweeping a wash. That's just kind of a small canyon. It's basically a sandy area where the river has washed out a lot of the sand and left these, I would say 6 to 10 foot cliffs of sand cliffs that are impossible to climb up. But they were kind of trapped down there in the bottom of that wash, and they came under a fire. It was kind of an ambush. 5 of the soldiers in his company were killed during this action, and another 7 or so were injured, including him. Now, as he tells the story, his training took over as soon as the shots began fired, and he realized what was happening, and he directed half of the remaining soldiers, or nearly about a third of the remaining soldiers, to go downstream. Actually, there's no water running this, but it would be downstream area, and then go to the left. And he took another third and told them to go upstream, and then go to the right. And thus they double flanked them, and were able to get him pinned down in a crossfire, basically in the same position that they had put that platoon under. And there were 40 plus people, enemy combatants, and they were able to extinguish all of them. During this action, he was wounded, one of the wounded soldiers, and he received a Purple Heart, and later he received a Silver Star. I've seen both of these medals, and they're for real, so I know this isn't a made-up story. All those people that were in his platoon, serving under him, owe their lives to his thinking and his ability to put in practice the training that he had learned to be a sergeant, and it was very effective and saved all of their lives. Well, sometime later after this, he was doing some training, and he sustained an injury, which, for all practical purposes, ended his jumping out of planes for a living for the military. Instead, he was not totally disabled. He has a fairly physical job he works at today. You wouldn't think that he has a disability at all, but he wasn't at a point where he could jump out of a plane. They didn't call him totally disabled, but he was not suitable for duty, and so they retired him from duty. Now, the bad part about this, it was an honorable discharge, but the bad part about this is he was just under 3 years remaining to get to his 20 years. And everybody up his chain of command, that's his lieutenant, even up to the 2-star general that was in charge of his I don't know what they call him at that point, a battalion or whatever. Everybody up to the 2-star general in charge were telling the people on the Army Medical Board, just give this guy a desk job. He deserves it. He's done everything we've ever asked of him. He risked his life. He saves lives. He has a Silver Star, for God's sake. Just give him a job where he can finish out his time doing something. The medical board, the Army Medical Board, decided no. And this kind of didn't sit well with me when I heard this part of the story. I felt kind of anger and kind of ashamed that I'm part of this. My consent for all this stuff allows this stuff to happen. I don't stand up and protest. And my friend that was telling me the story says, well, I'm not the only person this has happened to. And there's hundreds, maybe thousands that this has happened to. Same thing. And while he's still covered by his medical treatments covered for life, his life is a much lower standard of living than it should be for all the risks he took. And I just want to let you know, just to kind of paraphrase the song Fortunate Son, this wouldn't happen to no senator's son. And that's for sure. Now, I don't know how those of you listening tonight feel about this, but it makes me sick to my stomach to know that my lack of opposition to all this has caused this scenario to happen to thousands of the best and brightest who have been willing to give their lifeblood for causes that turn out to be based on lies. elected officials who are the elected representatives of this person were contacted and made pleas to the government bodies on his behalf, but they were all ineffective. And this served as a sobering reminder to just how little real representation we have. Our representative government is an illusion. It's not real. I'm withholding the name of my friend, as I said before, because he has a life and a plan for the future, and I don't want to screw it up by bringing a lot of unwanted attention on it. But think of all the government officials who have committed crimes and not only not been punished, but have been given their pensions. Lois Lerner comes to mind. She isn't the only one. That was, for those of you who don't remember who Lois Lerner is, she's the former IRS commissioner who was using her position to thwart the efforts of conservative groups to form political action committees. And she was just making it impossible for them to be granted that status. And then I'm also reminded of the recent events where the U.S. Army left $500 million worth of military equipment in the desert and just abandoned it and left it there for ISIS to come and commandeer and take over. And these people have no sense of decency. They have no respect for the property that they're entrusted to by the U.S. taxpayers. I mean, it's been paid for by the citizens of this country, either with their taxes or with the loss of purchasing power of their dollar due to the dollar printing taking place. And yet they want to scrimp and save a few $1,000s here and there on these people that are actually risk their lives and shed blood for this country. And to me, it just doesn't set well. So I'm just going to leave with one final thought and then kind of try and tie these two stories together. Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be soldiers. They'll misuse and abuse them and steal their futures to line the pockets of the war profiteers. And some of you out there may have some musical talent. Maybe you could kind of make that into a song. I don't know. I'm kind of stealing that from, I think it was a country western song a little bit, the first part of it. Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. And I got to thinking more about all the people's lives that this guy saved. And what if one of those guys turns out to be another Douglas Lamb? And he has a grandson someday is out there and hammering away for the cause of freedom and liberty for all of us. And he's just an entrepreneurial person that's always trying to find a better way to do something. And he's that was just in that one action where he was awarded that military medal. Potentially, he did more to enhance our lives of the people in this country than anything any government official's ever done in their life, just by saving those men's lives with his actions. And if you don't believe me, or you think I'm being a little bit melodramatic about that, think about the story of Drew's grandfather, that there's several times when he could have perished during World War II, at least two, and maybe others that he wasn't even aware of. And yet he somehow came through unscathed. And without that happening, Drew would not be around today. And I think these two stories really go together, and they just show you how important some things are, and we don't give them the proper, the proper respect or the recognition that they deserve. And I just would hope that these two stories would reach and touch you as deeply as they've touched me, and it'd be as meaningful to you as they've been to me, because they really changed the way I think about a lot of things this week, just mulling over those two things. So, Dave, we're going to come up to you now, but do you have, before we get into your subject, do you have any comments on these two stories?
Yes. The day that I lost my stepdad, I lost my mom first and then my stepdad, and because of the loss of my mother, me and my stepdad grew very close. And he told me the day he was in Saipan on board a Navy ship. Now, his primary job was cook, but he was a yak-yak gun operator. And he said he was firing away, and all of a sudden he went empty. And he didn't realize that they'd been hit. And all his ammo bearers were killed right next to him. But because he was behind armor, he survived. So that's another story of World War II. And if I told you what the Navy did to him, you would cry. And what the Social Security Department did to him, he was a Knott's baby. And anybody want to know about that, Google it. Knott's babies. It's where they wiped out 25 years of his Social Security. They just wiped it off the books. They did it to all the Knott's babies. You know that, right?
I wasn't aware of that, but it does not surprise me. And anybody that thinks that they're not going to steal the remaining Social Security funds at some point in time when the United States goes bankrupt,
what funds?
You're kind of not dealing with reality very well.
There ain't no funds. That fund's bankrupt.
That's true. But they continue to print money for people to spend until the end of that ruse comes up, and I don't think there's much more time left before that ruse goes on. So if you have the ability to get any money out of the Social Security system at all right now, I would take advantage of it.
Anyway, so
10 years, you probably won't be able to get anything.
Oh, I think they'll give you the money, but I think it won't be, you'll be using it for toilet paper because it'll be cheaper than buying toilet paper.
That could be. Who knows? I just know it's not going to have any purchasing power, so it's...
well, no.
It's the same as stealing it all.
It's the biggest bank heist ever performed by the elite. But that's another story for another day. What I'd like to talk about is, before I get started, I like to say to Jules, I have between two Google pages a 28K rating, and I have 4,000 likes on Facebook, and I have 4,700 tweets. Between two, that's per tweet channel I have two. It's kind of hard to explain how I got that. But if she gave me a show, I'd have a reach of 50 million people because I get 2 million hits a day. I get 2 million emails a day that I can't even read. I don't even know how to do that. So, that aside, I'm going to talk tonight about a meeting I went to at the Glease Mining District in Grants Pass on Redwood Highway at the Grange Meeting Hall. Kirby Jackson, the chairman of that board, gave me a file number. He didn't tell me what was in the file number, but he told me to give him my township and my range of my claim. Well, township and range is not one section. It's all the sections in a township. There could be, townships can be different sizes depending on geography, but there's an average of 30 to 40 sections in a township on average. So he wanted my township and range. So this is what I wrote for Freedom of Information Act to the Bureau of Land Management. I'm requesting from the USDI BLM a Freedom of Information Act request for PL 167 file. The complete file. My township is 40 South, Range 5 West. I need it for my U.S. Supreme Court case 14-8915. My informis papus is in my petition, David Dwayne Everest versus the United States. I am CCing my attorney, Brian Butler, his phone, and I give his phone number. And I hope you got that posted.
Not yet. I have a job.
Yeah, I know.
So I plan to do this tonight. It'll be up on our Facebook page tonight.
Okay, so the address that you would mail, I mailed this to is P.O. Box 2965, Portland, Oregon 97208. And so this is the way I wrote it for me, because as an average citizen could do this. They could write a Freedom of Information Act. In the upper right-hand corner, they put their name, address, and phone number. Then they go down and they can make a request to the BLM the USDI, which is Department of Interior, and the BLM, which is the sub agency under the Department of Interior. Then they could put in a request for my claim name, my name, David Duane Everest, and you spell Duane Duane. It's the French Norman spelling. That's a long story how I got that one. Is a middle name, but then they could say the name of my claim, Twin Cedar, claim Twin Cedar, and they could take my BLM number 574160, and they could write a Freedom of Information Act. Now, if you're a citizen, you would write this as this is non-commercial interest, meaning that you're not going to be selling the information. It's just for personal knowledge. They'll send me, if I object, I'll sign a release. And they'll say, we don't give out money, how much any money is. They'll try to say, we won't tell them the money if you don't want us to. I'm going to sign, they release the complete file, and any monies that are stated in it, those will be damages later. Okay, so I would like to make that public. And so if I get, I've done a request, Kirby Jackson, they've done it in another case. I don't know exactly what's in that file, but I've got a good idea because I ran it. And somebody else's township and range came up when I ran that number, and I ran mine. And it was a mineral survey out of the state of New Mexico, southeast New Mexico. And so it listed all the minerals that were in the ground. I'd like to announce tonight a discovery of titanium near my claim, and that it's been filed on as we speak, and by my associate partner, Warren Marcus Davis. Do you know what you need titanium for?
Just about anything in the electronics industry. Plus, it's very lightweight and hard, used in golf clubs, but it's a space age metal. Right.
Well, what it is you put. Let's take the Warthog. It's made of it. You can't hardly shoot one of those things down. Now, it's not very fast because it was a cannon with a plane built around it. But all the drone technology that they're going to be building out at Grants Pass, that mineral will be sold in there. But this is for commercial use. I want to trade some of that titanium so that I can get a drone, so I can put ground penetrating radar, so I can find these minerals, so I don't have to guess, and so I don't tear up land I don't need to tear up. And ground penetrating radar, it'll be, I can do two effects. I can do a civil society courtesy thing, because we can map all the fault lines within our mountain range that's not been done. And you can do it with ground penetrating radar, and you can map all this stuff out. There's programs out there you can buy to do all this. It's off the shelf pretty much if you got the money. And then we could be mining these minerals, because see, you should be making golf clubs with titanium. They're very, I don't play golf and I don't care to because I can't swing a club, but that's a better practice than the Warthog.
Yeah, that's kind of taking swords into plowshares.
Yes,
to another level.
Right.
But getting one of the things you said that your partner is filing a claim on some titanium source, and now this is something I have no. It's just an idea that pops into my head. I have no proof of anything I'm going to say right now. This is just a theory. But that if it's true that your mining claim has a lot of titanium on it, that would certainly go a long ways to explain why they were so eager to get you kicked off of that claim and take it away from you.
Right. It shows conspiracy to commit fraud.
Well, if there really is titanium there, which there probably is, I mean, it would make a lot more sense now as to why Forest Service acted as
They
they
make
did
bullets
and
out of
broke
it,
several
too.
laws.
They make bullets out of it too.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. They actually make titanium pistols that are very lightweight. You hardly even know they're on your hip when you wear them, and
Right.
they shoot special hollow point bullets. They're
They
pretty.
shoot those hydroshocks that are
Yeah.
made of lead. What that is it's a hollow point with a spear in this inside, and they're perfectly legal because as long as you're just using lead, they're called hydroshocks.
Hmm.
And what
But
they're meant
um,
for is stopping power, not penetrating power. They're designed to stop where you want them at.
there's a ton of applications for titanium, and so far up until well, actually, we've mentioned this a couple times on the show. The largest known, or it's just proven, reserves of titanium are controlled by China, and the one unproven reserve that people are pretty sure exists, but they haven't been able to document exactly to what extent it is the reserve that exists in the Siskiyou Mountains, which is where your mining claim is.
That's where my mining claim is.
Yeah, and so there's quite a bit of
I've
it up
told
there.
you
They
about
just
the
don't know quite
gold,
how much.
silver, the copper that are in with the titanium.
Yeah, there's just literally probably millions of tons of precious metals up in those mountains.
Yes, there is. And by the way, see, because the scale of mining I would be talking about, you need machinery. Now, a lot of that can be use robotics, but you need people to maintain them, meaning that you don't have to send a human being down into hard rock anymore. It's going to be possible to remote mine it with a robot and to be a human running the robot. Because you'll have what they call dead man switches in them, where if the person leaves the machine, it shuts off, so nobody gets hurt. And then, like with the dump trucks they're using in that they're mining in Australia, there's a guy that drives around and handles like 5 dump trucks, these big, huge ones, right? But he drives around because it's a placer and they're operating as a placer, so the roads kind of change every day. So he's always remapping them every day, and he's sending it back to a control room that's like in town. The people that are running the control room are in a building somewhere, running it, running telemetry, running everything. And so they're all, where the mining is going to go here is high-tech jobs that are going to pay a lot of money for people to do the maintenance on these things, to keep them running. And then they'll be robotic for safety because in the future you won't need to send a human down underground. The robot will go down underground, and it'll be just bringing up the material and filling a dump truck that's a robot, but there'll be people involved. It takes hundreds and hundreds of people to operate this system, because you got repair people that replace the mechanical ends of this stuff and fix and actually keep the machinery running, like the diesel engines and stuff. But then you got guys that have to write the programming and write the code, and then there'd be a big, huge chain. But because the tonnage,
There's also the people that you know treat the titanium, or they take the mined ore and they extract the titanium from it and make it into usable forms so that they can go on to a manufacturing basis. And it's going to, if there's a lot of it out there and the increased supply drives the price down a little bit,
well, it's
it will be more available and more products, and it'll bring us, it'll improve our life. So even people that don't get a job in are going to see an improvement in their livelihood just from this mineral resource.
And they don't even necessarily, you don't know where the jobs will come from this, because see, there'll have to be a supply chain as well. You're talking about
you shouldn't have to concern yourself with that. Just know that if you're producing wealth, that wealth it's like a rising tide lifts all boats. That wealth will lift all boats. It's not like money that the Federal Reserve prints that
No, it's
think it's a
actually
rising tide when it really isn't. This is real things being produced that have real value, that make things work better, work more efficiently, and you're able to create products that you couldn't create before because of the properties of this metal. And if it's as abundant as it seems like it could be, it could make a major impact on life.
Oh, it could make the state of Jefferson, now that's my lead into that, it could make the state of Jefferson quite wealthy because we don't have to have an income tax. We don't have to have a property tax. The only tax we have to have would be first purchased item. And that
I'm not even sure we need to
everything
have that. I'm kind of a voluntarist. I think that the more money you give government, the more power it buys for itself with that
right,
money.
but
So
you limit
try and
the
starve your government as much as possible.
right, and this would starve them because they'd only have enough so they could keep the paperwork because that's all we want them to have is enough money to keep the records.
I think you could probably do that on a fee basis, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, we have to figure that out. There's lots of things that'll have to be figured out how we run this government, but we have to make each government employee, if there is an employee of the government, be suable in small claims court for their actions.
I don't have any problem with that. I think the fact that they're immune to lawsuit makes them act like they're power mad little Napoleons out there.
Right. So now, what I like to talk about is starting a grassroots effort. Now, I'm not talking about this won't be easy. This is going to be something that's really hard and really difficult, and things could happen that beyond our control or anybody else's control due to circumstances. But we could start laying the groundwork for having conversations about the Republic for Jefferson or the Republic of Jefferson. Stay away from the word state. We don't want to use any word state. We don't want to use Commonwealth. We want to use the word republic. And the word republic comes first. And then the first duty is to the republic. And you make you get rid of this communist thing that everybody does when they salute the flag that was written by a communist, and that was a flag seller that wanted to sell flags. Because a friend of mine named
So I can kind of let everybody who's listening who may not have caught the reference you made. The very first, we didn't always salute a flag and say a Pledge of Allegiance. It was written by, actually he was a socialist, but socialism and communism are so similar. What's the difference? But anyway, he wrote it, and the very first pictures they have of children saying their Pledge of Allegiance showed them giving a Nazi salute to the flag. So just letting you know what the roots of that are and what its intent was to.
Right. And see, so a friend of mine named Lyle Woodcock, he's dead. He's an old cowboy. He was a rancher, and he was a nice old man when I met him. He was my friend. And he died this last summer. I went to his funeral, and he had a lot of friends. He was a rich man in that way, but he participated in fighting the county commissioners and pointing out corruption after corruption after corruption. That he couldn't ever get anybody to pay attention because what is he? He's just some guy that raised cows, and he's a farmer. We can step on him, except when they stepped on him, he was the 900-pound gorilla. He stepped back, and he always had somebody that could help him with the law. And he was very good at being a student of life. And I learned one thing about him. One day he comes up to me and he tells me, Dave, I thought you were just another dumb miner. He says, I owe you an apology. And I said to him, well, did you tell anybody about it? And he goes, no, I didn't tell anybody. I just thought it to myself. And I said to him, well, no harm, no foul. You didn't tell anybody. He said, no, but I told myself that. So in order for forgiveness, I got to ask for forgiveness from you because I thought it about you. And I said, well, I don't hold grudges. So you didn't upset me. And thank you for the compliment that I'm smarter than the average bear. And he used to love it when I'd be in the commissioners meeting and reading my grievances. He thought that I could do better on the writing, but the speaking he loved to listen to. And so until the day he died, he fought the county commissioners, and he's going to be well missed by all the miners. And so that's a tribute to my friend Lyle Woodcock. He was a man of men, the way they used to be. And I'd like to see him again.
Yeah, there used to be a lot of rugged individuals out here in the West, and unfortunately, we had a lot of Casper milquetoasts move in and kind of camp out on the land that these rugged individuals tamed.
Well, I'll tell you what.
They've kind of turned it all to shit.
So you know who the miners have always had the problems with, right? It's the Chamber of Commerce. Remember, the miners started first, then the Chamber of Commerce was founded through merchants when they realized the miners were organizing, because see, they were all the hucksters, gamblers, hookers, bartenders, all the corruption and vice of its day. And if you think there's vice around here now, you should have been around here in the 1860s. There was vice here because...
Oh, yeah, it's just... And, until recently... there's still places in the United States where prostitution is legal, but in Alaska, I believe it was in Ketchikan, they had it was called something Creek, and there was just a row of houses kind of behind the town that you cross the bridge and you go down there, and there were a bunch of prostitutes lived there, and they entertained their clients in these houses, and it was known as it was Cow Creek or something Creek. And it was everybody was happy. It was a voluntary exchange. Nobody was getting hurt.
Well,
and then a sudden, a bunch of moral people, or quote unquote moral people, got up there and said they needed to change this because they certainly did not like this happening in their community, and so they started to divide people and cause all this consternation and.
They're the ones that started the Indian Wars. They're the ones
there are always some people that just can't stand it when other people are happy and peaceful and having a good life, and they just have to go in there and force them to have the life that they want them to have.
Well, out where
just screws everything up.
Out where my claim was, mine was the tail end of an army base, because in 1861, when the war broke out, there were Confederates here. They were robbing the gold miners. So the gold miners, because it was a matter of national security, and at that time, the miners paid royalty to the government. And out of Steamboat Mining District, where that's the former name of the district that I was in, that my claim was near, they paid the government 54 million ounces of of gold, and they hydroed. Now, my claim wasn't hydro because it was too flat. And I come across junk, like old mattresses that are from that period of time that they just left behind. It's trash. But, and they're impossible to get out of the ground because they're petrified in the ground. So I don't disturb them, so because it's part of the history. I'm not going to take that. So, but with my claim and then the surrounding claims on him that we're finding him around him from finding the years of being out there, and Marcus being a very good hiker, he's been out doing field studies, and we've got several claims we'll be filing on, and Some of them we might put up for lease, but that'll be a later date for a later time. I want to take care of my case. So back to this Freedom of Information Act.
Yeah, now I want to stress people, Dave isn't the only person that needs to do this. You also can get this information yourself, and I think the more people that have this information, the better, because I think there's some reason why they're kind of trying keeping it secret, in that they don't want people to know how much wealth they're hiding from the American people.
Well, there's another thing too, is it gives all the biological diversity. There's some of those reports under, and they're all on Forest Service lands, the ones I've seen that I've looked up on the net, and they're related to this PL 167 file. So you could also go, you could be asking, you could also ask, that's why you ask for the complete file, because if you just ask for the file, they'll just send you the environmental stuff. When you ask for the complete file, they have to send you the complete file, and that'll be any mineralization. So, like for you, Drew, if you, Drew and you, Chuck, you could each individually do it or together, because you're broadcasters. There's exemptions for you guys from having to pay for a Freedom of Information Act. So a broadcaster or a news person or reporter could say, I'm doing a human interest story on Mr. David Dwayne Everest, and I would like his files so that I can do a complete report. And even whether you're commercial or non-commercial, it doesn't matter. They have to give it to you for free. And because they're files, they have to cough them up. Now, if I just do it, they might ignore me. If Kirby just does it, they might ignore him. So if on whatever case they got going, I don't know. They haven't told me any strategy. They're keeping it mums because it's a surprise. And they told me I would love it and that it would help me out. They told me to get this file to put in a request for it. So I've come up with the bright idea that if I get, like I got Marcus doing one, if I got you as a broadcaster, and I got Jules to do one, and I got Vincent to do one, and I got all my friends at UCY to do one, of both political stripes. If you don't like mining, do it anyways. Let's see what's in the report, and let's see who's right, and let's get the BLM to quit hiding records, because these are important records. They don't belong to them; they belong to us. They just told them as trustees with the public.
Yes, and it's another thing that a lot of people don't seem to understand, even though we talk about it frequently on this show. These are not lands that are owned by the federal government. They have kind of assumed control of them, management, not ownership, but management control of these lands, because, quote unquote, it would be more effective to have a consistent policy throughout all these lands. And I don't think they can show a very good case for how well they've taken care of things. Their stewardship of these lands is horrible.
Right.
While they may have consistent policies, the application of those policies is very inconsistent and almost done so only when it suits their needs. And the protection of wildlife, the protection of the environment, the protection of the watersheds have just been abysmal. And I don't know why we stand for this.
The mineral land has been disposed. It's just a matter of filing on it, proving up the claim, and them granting private lodial title. Because when you get this, there can be no tax on it, because they gave the lands away lodially. So if I win my case, they're going to have to issue title. And I mean title, I don't mean warranty deed. I mean, they have to release it to my jurisdiction, as I'm a mining district, as I'm a local government. And so they have to surrender all jurisdiction to me when they issue me title. And it'll be it's privately owned. And so, if you have lands in the Applegate and you know your township and your range, why don't you do one on your own property and give your address? because you won't know what the BLM number is on it, but they'll have records before it was title issued. Because remember, the United States purchased all these lands in the Pacific Northwest. They bought them, and so when they bought them, they they had to get people out on them. So they made an offer all around the world. They made this a trust under international law of the grant and of the title. And so they invited people from all over the world because they needed miners, but they wanted them to have a stake in it. So by giving the lands free and open access to do lots of things that the government isn't letting us do in breach of the grant. And there's supposed to be a trustee. And since there isn't no trustee, there isn't a named trustee because I've looked for him. Nobody can tell me who it is. So that means there isn't one. And the last time I tracked anyone I could find that was a trustee, that was in 1993, and Clinton didn't reappoint one. And so he tried to declare a moratorium. The courts ruled the moratorium because Congress didn't ratify it. There was no moratorium. And so they had to start taking, after 2 years later, they had to start taking claims because the courts forced the BLM to take them because there can't be a moratorium. But nobody ever renamed the trustee. And so a single person responsible to sign off on the patent, that they are the ones that okay it. Then it's sent to the President of the United States to sign off the trust and release the title to you. And what's been happening is guys have been forced into courts and judges have been ordering it and ordering the BLM to sign off on it. But it's taken them 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, maybe 30 years to get that through the court system, which is unnecessary because there has to be a trustee. By the way, if the trustee is falling down on his job, you have recourses to appoint another trustee that isn't falling on the job. And then the BLM can be held in a breach of fiduciary duty for not performing their duties as trustee. And this is why I'm asking people, because if they get 1 or 2 or 5, that'll give them some anxiety. They'll still ignore it. If they get 10, they start getting indigestion. If they get 100, they start getting a headache and diarrhea and indigestion. They start getting the flu. And then when they get 1,000, they start having a heart attack. And if I can get 10,000, we bury them. We end the Forest Service. We can nullify the federal government through the nullification process through the state by them being in breach of a public trust. And this is where holding their feet to the fire really means. It meant that the trustee was in breach of his duty and they burnt his feet as punishment. That's where the term "we hold their feet to the fire," it's an ancient term the king used to do when he had a public trustee or any trustee. It could be a private trustee of a private citizen over a bank account, over land trust, that you're leaving your land to your son or your daughter or your nephew or whoever you're going to leave it to. And the trustee fell down on it. The king would have his feet burnt. That was just the beginning. Depends on how bad his breach of trust was. Sometimes, and the word testimony means on your testicles. That if you commit perjury, they cut them off. So if you look at these old ancient...
I just have to just stop you for a second here and comment that to me that is a true deterrent to crime.
Right.
So continue on.
And now, when you got a king that was actually breaching his fiduciary duty of trust to his subjects, meaning that a feudal system was looked out as the average person was not smart enough to run his life, and that it was the king's duty to protect them as a whole, so that you'd have the proper latrines dug in. People weren't just pulling over and pooping just to any old place, right? And so it was to keep things clean. And so there might be harsh punishments for throwing stuff out in the street, things like that on the commoner. But if you got a corrupt king that was all about power, then, because if you look at England before King William the Conqueror, now I know this is ancient history, but you got to understand where my kind of liberal comes from. I'm a liberal because I'm not for a monarchy, I'm not for an oligarchy, and I'm not for a collective. That is whether they're a progressive. When they say they're a progressive liberal, they're saying they're a socialist or a communist. If they're a monarchy, which, by the way, all collectives end up being monarchies. Look at what's happening in Russia. He's rebuilding the Tsar. He's going to be king. You watch. Anyways, so the idea of a republic where the people have a say in their local autonomy. This is where we have self-determination and respect of private property and the respect of the common areas, because we do need common areas for public meeting places. And freedom, the freedom to go out to the public square is for everybody. If you're gay, you have a right to get up to go to the public square. Now, I have a right not to listen to you, and you can't force me to listen to you. You only have the right to speak. Doesn't say anything about for the right for me to listen.
Yeah, and there's no right to not be. There's no right or privilege to not be offended. So,
right, there's no right to be not offended, because the First Amendment is about offending people. Because, see, they offended the king, and so they burned down his house. By the way, the word fired means when the Lord decided he didn't want you working for him, and the house that he let you put up on his land to get out of the shelter, or maybe the one he let you put up or had put up, well, he might burn it down, so you have to move along. And that's the word where the word firing comes from. So when somebody says they're fired, I say, they burnt down your house? And they look at me real strange, and then I explain where the term comes from and how it's changed.
We're coming up on the end. The music's going to start pretty soon, and I want to thank you, Dave, for joining me today. And for all of you listening to this, whether it's live or on a podcast in the future, I want you to just pause for a moment and think of all the struggles that Dave has gone through to get his case from where it started to a point where he's applied to the Supreme Court to have them hear his case, which is that in itself, I think, is quite an accomplishment. It has not been easy. He doesn't make any money on this. He lives very simply in order to accomplish all this. And if he wins, it's going to be a great thing for all of you out there in the listening audience, whether you agree with him or not. It's going to increase your freedom. And if he loses, well, we still have to. This is just one battle, and we can come back and try another one. But I hear the music coming, so I'm going to say good night. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you back here next week when Drew's going to be back and join us. Thank you all. Bye.